Welcome to the Voice of Truth. Jim Moore, Jeff Arnold, Don Ellswick. They're just reading. They ain't paying no attention that we're live and we're going well. They, guys,
hey, here we
see,
are.
I have to work with these kind of people all the time. I should get paid big money for this.
Yeah, you should.
I should. Anyway, guys, we're talking about this scapegoat mechanism, and we want to get to these four horsemen, and hopefully we can. And we're talking about this Monday when we left off. This guy who was an atheist, Rene Girard, you can look him up, and God had began to show him some amazing things because he began to see the scapegoat mechanism for what it is and how it worked. And when he did that, he began to go and look at all kinds of religious systems across all human history. And he sees the same thing. And he sees the same pattern, whether it's human sacrifice, whether it's animal sacrifice, sacrificial systems, whether it's very strict rule keeping and excommunication for those who don't follow the rules. It's the same thing, right? We come into we're kicking people out. They didn't keep the rules. They didn't
Clean house.
Clean house. So it's the same system, and every religious system follows a pattern of creating scapegoats for the community to push outside in order to create the peace and maintain the peace and allow that social cohesion to happen within the group. All of our social networks are built on the backs of pushing people away. You know, I even, go back again. I think about the history of our country. What did we do? Did we integrate with the Indians? Heck no. We pushed them away. We called it reservations, but what do we do? We're not making peace, we're conquering.
That's right.
That's what we do. We come in and we conquer and we make slaves, and we don't, we might not call it a scapegoat mechanism, but we'll call it a reservation, and y'all can go live like, poor people that never have nothing on reservations, and, we'll come down and pay you $2 to watch you dance.
Right.
It's crazy. There's a verse, I don't know, you still in Hebrews?
I'm moving wrong.
See, here we go. In Hebrews chapter 12 that Don was reading about on Monday, he was reading about chastisement, this word paideia, but in verses Hebrews 12 through 15, from that, he makes a statement here to strengthen feeble knees. Mm-hmm. Now think about that, because what do we normally do? Well, they're not strong enough to stay with us.
Turn
them out. But now there's a whole different culture, Don. It's not about turning the weak out. It's not about scapegoating the weak, those who are not like us. Now it's about strengthening feeble knees. It's about healing those who can't walk and bringing them in.
Yeah.
A whole different culture.
That's what Christ did. That's what he did.
Yeah.
Well, the passage in question is this, from 12 forward here. He says, "Wherefore lift up the hands that hang down, the feeble knees, make straight paths for your feet, lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, but let it rather be healed," as you were just mentioning. "Follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord." He goes on down to talk about looking diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness spring up or trouble you. Now, I was thinking of a passage just prior to that, back in Romans 14 and 9, where Paul wrote, "Let us therefore follow after the things which make for peace, and things whereof one may edify another." That's the goal. Edification. Building up, strengthening. Mm-hmm. And as you said, helping the weak. Yeah. That's the purpose of the church. Not casting down, not casting away.
No, we used to kind of think, well, if God has showed us the doctrine, He blinded everybody else, and we got the doctrine, so when you come in, we're going to examine you. Do you know the doctrine? Well, then God didn't show you, you're out.
That's wrong. That's just so wrong.
That's how we function, was it not?
Oh, yeah.
We functioned. We looked and we said, do they know the doctrine? Because we know the doctrine, and if God's really dealt with you, you know the doctrine. If you don't know the doctrine,
as a matter of fact,
you're out of here.
My daughter has been attending the church in Johnson City. That she asked to be a member of the church, and she has to take a test. Now, I don't know what the test consists of, but can you imagine taking a test, a young person? That,
I mean,
it's immediately intimidated.
It's in the Bible. And I'll tell you where it is. I believe it's in Acts 16. Paul's in a prison.
Uh-huh.
And you remember
Oh, yeah.
that night when that guy hollers out, "What must I do to be saved?" And Paul says, "Well, you got to take a test."
Right. That's right. And
We're
check your
being
credit
sarcastic, yeah. And check your credit score. Paul says,
Right.
"Believe and be baptized."
That's
That's
right.
the test, isn't
That's
it?
it.
That's the test. Believe. Oh my gosh. Well, all religious systems are ways to maintain this, systematize it, minimize the damage of it, but nonetheless allow it to continue to operate. So when we move from human sacrifice to animal sacrifice, that's Abraham, when God was moving them away from human sacrifice in the land of Chaldeans, of Isaac. We and I talked about that before. But
Yeah, you about knocked me out of a chair talking about it, actually.
yeah, now you can't fall back.
Right,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I got arms. See, I got the chair with arms on it in case he...
Seatbelt.
Yeah.
We get a seatbelt. But this is a way in which religion is continuing the violence, systematizing the violence, ritualizing the violence, but also ensuring that the violence is able to do its job because everything has a purpose, and its job is to keep the community together, because this is how things don't run amok. It's because the violence, even in the violence, there's a purpose in it and peace is maintained. But it's a false peace. Yeah, I mean...
Mm-hmm. Not as the world gives, give I unto you. That's what Jesus said.
Mm-hmm.
I leave a peace with you, not as the world gives.
Right.
Now, that's exactly what he's talking
So
about.
this peace that the world
Yeah,
gives
that's right.
is a peace through violence.
Uh-huh.
And it does maintain a little bit of social order. I mean, when they're out there, guys, I was watching a movie the other day. I forget what it was, but they would take the criminals out and on, like they used to do in our country, to the hanging tree and hang them. Now, what did you do? I'm looking and I'm thinking, I don't want to be that guy. So even though my heart says I want to go steal, I'm not going to steal because I might get hung. So the peace is maintained.
Sure. And like we talked about before, Ronald Reagan coined the phrase, peace through strength. Well, what does that mean? That means we will threaten you until peace is maintained.
Yeah.
We'll build a bigger nuclear weapon.
It's kind of interesting. If I might throw a little side ramp here in the conversation. Right now, we're in the middle of a political debate in our country that's only going to get hotter as time goes by. And a statement was made from one of the fellows that's running. Well, let me just tell you who it was. That's no problem there. It was Kennedy.
Bobby
name
Jr.
that, right? And he said, when questioned about our presence all over the world, they said, "You want to bring all our military home. You don't want peace through strength." And he said, "Well, you're right." And it floored the person that was interviewing and said, "But we need this. If not, China will overrun this. China will do this." He said, "Well, wait a minute here." He says, "Are we liked in all these other countries wherever we put our bases?" He says, "Let me give you the answer. No."
That's right.
Because we're there, we're showing force, we're the police, they don't like it. This is our country. Go to your own country. And he made the statement, not to get into the background of this, something about the 9/11 issue was stirred on because of the fact that here we are over there and we're trying to dominate and so forth. And so she said, "Yeah, but China, look what China will do." And he said, "Wait a minute." He said, "What is China doing? Does China have military bases all over the world?" "No, they're building businesses all over the world." He said, "Maybe perhaps we could just go and build businesses and help the countries legitimately and not have all these other, presence of military strength and things there." But this is this is the mindset of our world. We've got to show this force. We've got to keep you under control. And, we do it in a church. We do it in everything.
We do.
And it destroys lives. It doesn't unite lives. It destroys lives.
I'm going to say
It's
this.
temporary and it's phony.
Yes,
I'm
it is.
going to say this goes right along lines with what Don says. And I will say this. I hate to agree with these guys. God, it drives me crazy. But no, on a serious note, I believe this with all my heart. It's why we see the rise of violence in our churches, shooters,
Yeah.
because of that very reason. I mean, when you have this thing of violence, and as we get over here into these horses, hopefully, in a few minutes, we will see, because these were things that was unheard of until recently. When I say recently, I don't know when we had killings in churches, shootings in churches, shootings in school.
When I was a kid?
Never. We never heard of it. And now it's kind of, even when, and I read today maybe that the Chiefs may have had the last celebration for a sports team winning, a championship. This thing whether you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan or not, they won the Super Bowl. It's a big event. It's a time of celebration. I understand that. They've worked hard. They've earned it. And it's time for that whole community to come together in celebration. And what happens? They get a shooter. And it seems like in the last little bit, every sports team that has won a championship and they've had their parade, there's been a shooter. Now, why is that?
Good question.
Because of this whole scapegoating violence mechanism is all it continues to produce is violence begets violence.
Yeah.
And that's all it does. And we see it come more and more. But at the same time, I think when we get to, I got to lay out a little more groundwork, when we get to the book of Revelation, we will see what maybe is happening in our society and maybe what God is actually doing in our society. When I say our society, I'm not talking about Tazewell County or the United States. I'm talking about in our humanity, because He is moving us in a direction.
There's a church in our community. I won't mention the name, but my wife was there with some ladies for something. It was a non-church functioning event in the church. And one of the fellas told one of the mothers that had the children there, be careful, don't let them back towards that sound booth, because that's where our AR-15's kept. And my wife was floored. She come home and told me about it. She says, what are we doing? What are we doing to churches now? And someone says, well, the way things are, we got to defend ourselves and all this. You know the whole story. I never read, and I love church history, especially first century church history. I never read where any of the saints said, let's weaponize ourselves.
Well, they tried to. Peter did, didn't he?
What did Jesus tell him to do?
Put it away.
Put it away. This is the problem we have in we're falling into that trap.
Yeah, the church has become militants.
We have, very much. The church should be about peace. We should be about love. We should be about harmony. We should be about no war. I mean,
honestly, yeah.
That's the message that we should be projecting in the world.
That's right.
And we have just bought lock, stock, and barrel in all this garbage.
Caught right up in it.
Yes, that's destroying people's lives and causing hostility amongst people on the outside that's not like us, like you've been saying.
Yeah.
And they're upset. And you get someone that's a little mentally unbalanced and they're upset already, they're unhinged and they go and they want to act out. Well, we give them the ground to do that by our hostility towards them, when we should be preaching a message of love, preach a message of God wants to save you, God loves you, God is here to rescue you. And that's just the opposite is being preached in the church today.
Yeah. Instead of going to a church and feeling received and welcomed, you get to take a test, you get rules, you get all of this other stuff, and you're already coming there feeling unworthy, unwanted, unwelcomed. You don't know who God is, and when you come into the church and you feel more unworthy and more unwelcomed, and so now there's hostility and it comes out. And
I know there'll be people that'll listen to this and say, but you don't understand, and they'll run that whole gamut. All these problems going on here. But look, if the church collectively would get back to doing what the church is called to do, we could put an end to a lot of stuff in our society overnight.
Oh, yeah.
If the church could unite in the message of the cross.
Well, you go back to Leviticus, God gave them a scapegoat.
Yeah.
God gave them a scapegoat. And you know what they would do? Every year they would come with that scapegoat and they would put all of their sins, all of their hurts, all of their brokenness on that scapegoat. And what happened? Out that scapegoat goes. Well, Jesus, when He comes, He is the scapegoat. But at the same time, what we have in Christianity is a story that plays into the scapegoat mechanism and at the same time undermines it. and pulls all of its strength away. The same very thing that Jesus would talk about when he's talking about Satan, casting out Satan, Beelzebub, remember they accused him of? We've talked about it many times. Jesus is not really making a joke there saying, well, it's crazy Satan cast out Satan. He said, actually, that's how that system works, but how I'm going to undermine it is a stronger man is going to come into his house and bind him and spoil his goods. Right?
That's right.
So that system is in place. The scapegoating, the violence, he's casting out devils, casting out scapegoats. And that's what we see. We see enemies everywhere. But the Christian story is Jesus is coming in here as the scapegoat, but at the same time, he's going to do away with the scapegoat. I referenced this verse so many times in the book of Hebrews. There's therefore no more sacrifice for sin. And I know how I looked at it in one sense, no more sacrifice, but I see it in a whole nother light now.
So do I.
There's no more I will say it this way, no more scapegoating. It's over. No more. Done. It's it. There's no more Jew, and there's no more Greek, and there's no more Gentile, there's no more Scythian, there's no more barbarian, there's no more, none that you can pick on and say, we're the chosen. You're not. Right. And it's grotesque to me to think that I was a part of that system, even as Paul was a part of that system and didn't even know it. That's why Jesus said, Saul, what did he come? Saul, if you don't stop it, I'm going to get you. He said, Saul, why are you scapegoating me? Why are you persecuting me? Oh, what do you mean? And then we know later on the scales fell off his eyes. And now he gives us most of the New Testament with these very words.
That's right.
So this no more sacrifice for sin, this is not, you got to go pay for it yourself. That's just a stupid idea. That idea, I know when I hear it, it means you are still caught in the blindness of the scapegoat system. And when you're caught in the blindness of the scapegoat system, you see all kinds of things, but it's still a violent outcome.
And the scapegoat system is so subtle. And it makes you believe that you are on board with everybody. I mean, when those planes flew into the Twin Towers, and George Bush stood up there and said, the ones who took down these buildings, we will take down. All of the United States
they come together.
Absolutely. They come together in a common enemy, right? It happens over and over and over. To your point, God is removing, he's removing the scapegoat mechanism.
Let me tell you this, as Don's looking up this verse here, I won't tell you where I work because I don't want to get in trouble, but there is a company trying to take over our company. It's big, it's been in the news, it's all this stuff. So we get these letters and we get these emails of all the happenings that's going on. And I find it funny. I was telling a young man today that it's funny because we get a letter from the union about how good the company is, how much they've worked together, how much ground they have gained, how they've worked together for 50 years. And I just laugh when I read it, and I'm thinking scapegoat mechanism. Because the letter I got last year when they were in the middle of contract negotiations, this company is the most ruthless company in the whole world. All they want to do is take our money. They don't want to give us help. But now they're united because somebody is about to lose their position.
Yeah.
Same story. It's the scapegoat mechanism.
World War II with Japan. Hate them. After everything's over, roll out the red carpet. Oh no, you can't feel this way towards them. I mean, it just goes on and on.
It really does.
And because another scapegoat come along.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
We went to Korea.
Now they're going to unite with us.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, we went to Korea. Then we went to Vietnam.
Mercy.
Yeah. But in the Christ story, do you have a verse there, brother?
I was thinking of something that was said a moment ago. And, Jesus made a strange statement in Matthew 10 and 28. He says, fear not him which kill the body. Now, this is one of the things we do in the church all the time. We love our life so much that we won't lay it down. And you said that a moment ago. We're afraid of death. You said. The New Testament, Revelation 12 says this, and just think about this. He says, they overcame him, the enemy, by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto death. In other words, they didn't say, no, I can't let you do this. I'm not going to die. They understood, you can't kill the saint of God. Oh, you might destroy this flesh, but you can't touch me because I'm secure in Christ. Mm-hmm. Well, what does that do? That puts you on a different plane. It puts you in the arms of the Lord through all things, and you understand that, look, the weapons of our warfare, they're not carnal. You know, they're mighty through God to the pulling down strongholds. So someone may have this malicious intent against us, want to really come at us hard. We don't sit back and say, well, let me get my gun and we're gonna get this on. You know, no, we say, you do what you have to do.
The fear of death is an enormous motivator.
And when we say that, what we do by saying that is just what Jesus did when he's standing before Pilate. What did Pilate do? He marveled at him. We want to see conversions in the world. The church needs to quit acting like the world.
That's
Absolutely.
right.
We've got to quit acting like
You know, I heard an elder one time say, as the church, so goes the world.
Yeah.
And that was pretty profound, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, if we become militant and are caught up into the same mechanism that Jim talks about, the same scapegoat mechanism that they are, then what's the difference? You know, why would anybody come in out of the rain where it's raining inside?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, where's safety?
I know. Yeah. Well, you know, in this Christ story, when he comes as the scapegoat, he's the one who comes along, Jesus, and you know, he says there's no more outsider, and he doesn't treat anybody as an outsider. And we see this along, if we can pick up on the language, because when I say outsiders, we may read it in the King James Bible as a leper, as a woman with an issue of blood. Right, these were the outsiders. But Jesus just went right and touched them and laid hands on them and spoke to them, and they're like, oh my God, these are outsiders. So he's not only telling us there's no outsiders, he's showing us,
right,
and he's
showing
actually laying hands on them. There's no more outsiders here. And so in doing that, he becomes the one that we turn all our violence upon. He becomes the one. So it's not that Christ is a good sacrifice, or it's not that Christ is a better sacrifice. It's not even that Christ is a perfect sacrifice that finally appeases God. It's the fact that Christianity is God playing into our perceived need for a sacrifice, specifically so that he can undermine it and release us from it. Release us from it. Jesus would say this, you'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free. So that must mean we're bound up into a system that we need freedom from. Right?
No question.
And he is going to release us from that whole system where we only feel safe if we push somebody aside. If we push somebody away. And guys, we see it all along. I mean, my kids play sports. And you know what? Right here in our own community, the Tazewell Bulldogs hate the Richlands Blue Tornadoes. And the Richlands Blue Tornadoes hate the Graham G-Men. And you know what? He went to Graham, I went to Tazewell, kids went to Richlands. And now we work together, and our dads and our school teachers, and we see it different. But we grow up with another hate for people that we don't even, that we play against. And it's you know,
yeah, you're right.
We can enjoy seeing an athlete that God has blessed with a given ability to jump high, and you know what I mean, an ability to run fast, things that are amazing that I can't do. We can't enjoy God's gifts. We got to make it a combat sport, so to speak. But all along, it eases the violence. It appeases for a little while. It brings peace for a little while.
And you know what's amazing about how men, leaders, try to stop the violence? Well, let's take away all guns. We hear that a lot. You could take away every gun on the planet, and there would still be violence. There wasn't a gun at the first murder. I'm sure there was a lot of murders before guns was invented.
Sure.
Sure.
Romans didn't have any.
But it's amazing to me that every time that there's an issue, men try to fix it, other than with Christ. They've tried to fix it every other way.
Well, I will say this. Every human being is naturally socialized into a world that needs scapegoats and outsiders. You're just naturally, we grow up in it because it's bred into us from the moment we begin to see the world around us, and we imitate it because it's everywhere. It's in every book, it's in every school, it's in every religion, it's in every church, it's in everything that you go. It's just natural, it's as common as the air you breathe. And so we all owe this debt to scapegoating, this violence. But Christ comes from outside of the story. It's why he comes from outside of that. And he's the God-man who steps into the story and has absolutely no debt to violence, no debt to scapegoating, no debt to evil, no debt to anything but the very pure desire to imitate the Father.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was his desire, right? His desire, not to imitate us.
That's right.
To imitate the desires of the Father.
Right.
So Jesus doesn't need to triangulate desire. Jesus actually desires whatever the Father shows him. And so with Jesus, there's no violence, no scapegoating. I mean, he doesn't need to push anyone away because Jesus is telling us there's no outsider. And because of that, Jesus threatens everything that maintains our peace. We've kept our peace by building a middle wall of partition. That's kept our peace in the temple, Don, by dividing. And now you want to tear it down. Now we see the danger. Even, who was it, Caiaphas says, it's better that one man die. Better that we sacrifice one than all of the Jews. Yeah, right? So they knew how the scapegoat mechanism works, but they were blinded in the very system. So, when we scapegoat Jesus, when we direct all of our violence and hatred towards the outsider on the one who tells us there's no more outsider, and we scapegoat Jesus, when we direct all that violence towards God, we're then allowed to enact all of our worst, all of our most violent fantasies out on Jesus, and we crucify him, we scapegoat him. And one thing about it, the scriptures are very clear, all people groups are included. So we can't now scapegoat a people group and say, well, y'all did it. It wasn't us. All guilty. All people groups are guilty of scapegoating the only innocent one that there ever was. So, but the whole narrative of the Gospels, they don't identify with a mob, it identifies with Christ. It identifies with Jesus in the midst of that. It's all about him. And because of that, Christianity is doing something fundamentally new. I'm talking real Christianity. Doing something fundamentally new in the history of humanity. And it's telling us that we no longer need a sacrifice. No longer need a scapegoat. And Christianity, it goes right to the heart of the scapegoat mechanism, and it unveils the fatal flaw in it. And the fatal flaw in it, we close out today, scapegoating only works if you believe in it. Isn't that amazing? You have to actually believe that the person you're scapegoating is the problem.
Sure.
That's why we have so much politicizing going on. If we can make Joe be the problem, or Don be the problem, not you, but Donald be the problem, and we can scapegoat either one of them, then our country will be fixed.
And when you blow that system up, then it don't work anymore, does it?
Yeah. See, if you know they're not your enemy, not the problem, you're just scapegoating them to make yourself feel better, then the whole system falls apart. It only works when you believe that they're the problem. And see, when you begin to see this, man, it opens up a whole lot. I mean, to me, it's like we got a whole new mission field ahead of us, a whole new thing to talk about. Anyway, guys, we'll run out of time. We're going to get to those horses on Friday. I promise you, we're right on the verge of getting to those horses.
On the cusp.
On the cusp of the horses of the apocalypse. So tune in Friday. And guys, Lord bless. We'll see you then. If you've enjoyed this clip, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, And tune in next time. And we're going to keep pumping these shows out for you. So, Don, any parting words?
Oh, just keep tuning in.
Keep tuning in. Amen. Lord bless you all.